Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. Aaron and Marissa needed to be at the station at noon. That meant that they had one more hour than they usually had before church when they awoke that morning. His face shaved, his bladder empty, and his teeth brushed. He felt it only reasonable to use that time to store up memories for their future period of deprivation. Marissa seemed amenable. After a long period of her writhing beside him, their kissing and making out, and then her writhing again, he entered her. He loved her and desired her, but the feeling was less desperate than it had been the night before. He stroked slowly through her warmth, supporting his weight on elbows and knees. He loved her, loved the sight of her beneath him, loved the feeling of her around him. Only at the very end, with her hips rising from the bed to meet his thrusts, did ferocity grip him. He drove into her forcefully, and more forcefully each successive time. When she clutched around him, he drove into her violently and poured his love and desire into her. He slept beside her after that, and she probably slept, too. Then they shared a lovely, if short, shower. He watched her prepare another fancy breakfast. It was delicious to eat, and the preparation was lovely to watch. Although the train station was much closer, they left more time than they ever did for church after taking into effect the hour difference. Well, missing the train had worse penalties than missing the introit. The trip up in the train was a social time. He didn't mind her sorority when he and Marissa dealt with it together, and these women seemed to accept that he and Marissa were a couple. Her parents met her, and Dad met him. After taking the luggage to her family's car, he went off to Dad's. And how did the quarter go? Dad asked when they were in traffic. Up to now, the grades have been fine. I still have a paper and a project out. And of course the finals haven't been graded yet. Still, they felt okay while I took them. Your social life seems to be going well, too. You're happy about that? Quite happy. He would rather have Marissa's promise to marry him. Really, though, she had promised to think about it. And the estimable Miss Grant? Do you think she is happy with your association as well? That's none of your business. I'm biting my tongue to avoid the obvious retort. If you want to avoid it in the future, choose another adjective. That was really like the old man. He didn't say, no, it's your business. On the other hand, he let you know that he could have. I've heard you use it, he pointed out, but not where it invites a retort like that. I'm saying think before you speak. I'm not saying always avoid swear words. All right, it's none of your damn business. And, I didn't ask any intrusive questions. If, of course, you let Dad decide what was intrusive. I merely expressed a friendly interest in your happiness. Well, as I told you, I am quite happy. As to whether I'm able to keep her happy, that's none of your damn business. Fair enough. Have you thought of your Christmas present for her? Thought about? Yes. Decided? No. Well, probably it is wiser to shop up here for someone who lives on campus. You've shipped off your presents to California? Yeah. I'm a responsible adult, you know. That's 3 separate issues. Are you responsible? Often. Are you an adult? Not yet. Do I know? Really, do you need to ask? I remember the Aaron whose diapers I used to change. I accept my children's limitations. My children might try accepting mine. But yours are so many, he pointed out. Many as they may be, only a few affect you directly, and really most of our quarrels are about only one. I still think of you as my son, when you want me to think of you as an entirely independent agent. Well, accepting that limitation of yours means accepting a limitation, a handcuff, of my own. Why can't I be an independent agent? Oh, when I limit you objectively, then you have a fair complaint. I'll try to deal with it fairly. What I ask you to accept is my point of view. Parenthood is tragic. Either the nestlings fly away, or they don't. If they do, our identity as a parent is destroyed. If they don't, we've failed as parents. You don't seem all that eager to allow me to fly away objectively, as you say. Well, really, Aaron, you're the sort of kid who needs a college education. It's not some weakness of yours. It's talent or ability. I'm not insisting that you stay under my control so I can pay your tuition. I'm paying your tuition because that's my responsibility. A year and a half more, and you'll fly away. I'm counting the days. And, Dad continued, I'll celebrate. I may cry in private, but I'll celebrate quite honestly. 2 of us will graduate. Anyway, you've told me that the coursework looks like good grades up till finals. There's nothing in your courses these days I could understand besides the grades. You tell me that your relationship with Miss Grant is none of my damn business. Has your life in the last quarter had any other aspects at all? Weather, but you've seen much the same. A little less, due to the continental effect. Which is? Dad asked. Badly named. Oceans are huge heat sinks. They change temperature much less rapidly than land. So, land next to oceans has less violent swings with the seasons than land in the middle of continents. It should be called the shoreline effect. Except that oceans are the majority surface of Earth. Good point. I think it got named because the first scientists studying weather were in England and France. Russia seemed odd to them. The first person to study weather scientifically may have been in Philadelphia Benjamin Franklin. Didn't know that. That old man really got around, didn't he? I knew, of course, about the capacitor and the other electrical developments. Jefferson, Dad said, wrote the Declaration of Independence because the other delegates were afraid of assigning it to Franklin. They thought he might insert a pun that they wouldn't catch. Well, I did have one subject this quarter that would interest you. My very last distribution course was anthropology. We learned a little about some weird cultures. Apparently, anthropologists don't study the weirdest culture of all. I need to keep my eyes on the road. Proceed as though I'd waved my eyebrows at you. Our own. Okay. He'd decided that. Since Marissa couldn't be weird, he was. But now he was talking to Dad, who was definitely weird. He, and his society, had rules far crazier than any the course had covered. Sunday, he got to see Marissa again. They sat together in church, and their hips, at least, touched. Afterwards, though, they parted. Monday, he went downtown and bought Marissa a chain like the ones he'd seen girls wearing. He didn't think that was too intimate a gift. He bought Dad a biography of Tamerlane. He'd checked the library in the house, and Dad didn't have one. When he brought his gift over to Marissa's house, she gave him a wrapped package, which he put under the tree back at the house. He had a lot of packages for him there. Dad had 3. She called the next day to invite him to dinner on Monday. He told Mrs. Bryant he wouldn't be there Monday night, and then he thought he should tell Dad, too. Are you taking Miss Grant out? Should I make sure to be home at a certain time so you can use the car? Actually, I'm having dinner at her house. And would you like to return the gesture? Dad had picked up Marissa's habit of rhetorical questions. Really, you can't invite her here for dinner yourself according to formal etiquette, but I can. If you'd like that, you can pass along my invitation for Wednesday. He did, and she accepted. She's had the roast beef, Dad said. What do you think we should serve this time? Mrs. Bryant has plenty of dishes she prepares quite well. The chicken breasts? I think the baked ham is her second best meal. Then that's what we'll have. He told Mrs. Bryant the next day. Do you want Miss Grant's gift first or last? Dad asked after breakfast on Christmas morning. Did he think anything else could top it? Likely not. He was just asking whether Aaron wanted to build up to it or start off with it. Last. You're the only one of my kids who ate sandwiches crust first. Dad handed him a magazine subscription. Aaron appreciated the gesture. He always enjoyed reading them even if they weren't a surprise. Dad opened a package now and then as well. Aaron went through the usual gifts: Dad's, Molly's, Mom's, and April's before finally opening Marissa's. It was a pen and pencil set, and he immediately decided to use them for class notes. The next day, she was wearing the chain he had given her. He was glad he had thought to tuck it in his shirt pocket, even though he never wrote anything during church. Dinner at Marissa's house on Monday began rather formally. Though they were church members, they didn't say grace. The conversation was a bit stiff at first, and Aaron made an effort to be pleasant. Marissa told me, he said to her mother, you were in the same sorority, just in a different chapter. Dickinson, wasn't it? You remembered. Yes, he had. It seemed she appreciated being identified as a fellow Zeta. The conversation continued along those lines. I've got a great line, Marissa said. I've known little sisters who got into feuds with their big sisters. Girls who couldn't stand their grand big sister at all. But Natalie, Beverly, and I are the best of friends. Joyce looks like a fine addition. Nice girl, he said. Another education major, but she's thinking of the primary grades. He didn't want to dominate the conversation, but he thought he should contribute something in agreement with Marissa, although it was his honest opinion. You know the girls in Marissa's house? Her father asked. Lots of them. He didn't know them all, knew fewer than half the pledges. In fact, I picked Marissa up, and there are other women there. Football games and dances. Marissa sometimes introduces me to some of her sisters. I certainly know her line. I get the impression that you are the only one she dates. I get the same impression, house dates accepted. She had, indeed, told him that, but his pleasure was her father's displeasure. I know parents would prefer their daughters to keep window shopping, but sooner or later they make their selection. After all, Marissa was going steady when I met her, back in high school. Well, we'd known Colin. He made that sound like an accusation. Actually, though, he tried to present his bona fides. Well, yes, but that's a product of going off to college. If she'd accepted my first invitation for a date, I'd have picked her up right here. You'd have called me in and asked me all sorts of questions and laid down all sorts of rules. Probably, I'd have been your guest loads of times. But you know me better than you know any of the guys she dances with on house dates. You can find out about my dad by asking at church. Mr. Schmidt was my employer for the past 3 summers. You're not interested in most of that, but you can ask him what he thinks of me. That's as much as you knew about the other boy, probably more. Really, Dad, if this is the first time Aaron is eating dinner with us, It's because it's the first time he was invited. And I'm open to questions. The question, her brother said, is if you're balling her. Make that her brat brother. He could take anything. But that was an attack on Marissa. Pete, you're a high school senior, no? He asked. Yeah. If I made a suggestion about my sister's sex life in his hearing, much less at the dinner table, my dad would turn me over his knee. And I'm 3 years older than you are. If you want me to think of you as an adult, talk about relativity. Relativity? Pete didn't have a clue. I could talk about relativity when I was a high school senior, and I didn't think I was an adult. That might be stretching it. Anyway, it's something adults talk about. They also talk about the recent elections. Schoolboy snigger. So much for her brother. But he didn't want to antagonize her father any more than he already had. I'm sorry, sir. I spoke out of turn. I didn't have the right to discipline your little boy. Well, Pete was out of turn, her father said. You're studying electrical engineering? I'm not sure I know what they do. And the rest of the conversation avoided his relationship to Marissa, which was the only subject which interested everybody at table. They kissed, if drilly, on the porch when he left. Pete was probably watching. Even if he wasn't, Marissa was frozen by the possibility. And how was the estimable Miss Grant? Dad asked when he returned. Estimable. If Dad wanted to play vocabulary games, he'd play with him. She cooked a delicious beef stroganoff. Unfortunately, she's plagued by an annoying kid brother. Well, I don't know the lad. How old? High school senior, needing kindergarten social training. Think Molly today's years with Molly 5 years ago's behavior. Well, I don't know the lad, as I said. Consider, however, that you had 2 younger sisters who could have been equally obnoxious. The moppet was never obnoxious. Miss Grant won them over. It may be that you had worse material to work with. It may be that you worked it with less skill. And it may be both. Pete, after all, had been a scum-sucker despite Marissa's skill. It could quite possibly be both. She's still on for Wednesday? Certainly. Good. That I don't appreciate her company as much as you do doesn't mean that I don't appreciate it. And Wednesday, he appreciated her presence so obviously that she commented on it. It is a real pleasure to be here, Mr. Turner. I get the real feeling that you like me. What's not to like? Dad asked. You're an intelligent, sensitive, attractive young woman. And most of all, attractive was damning with faint praise, and he said so. Attractive? She's utterly beautiful. And most of all, Dad went on as if he hadn't spoken, as if he didn't exist. You're good to him and for him. Story was told of a woman in the past century who dined on successive nights with 2 of the most famous hosts in England. After the first night, she came away thinking that her host was the most interesting man in the country. After the second night, she came away thinking that she was the most interesting woman in the country. Well, despite the contrast in appearance, Erin looks better in your company. And as for you, my son, his father said, you don't love her because you think she's the most beautiful woman on campus. You think she's the most beautiful woman on campus because you love her. Well, Dad had a point. That being said, Miss Grant, he continued, I think you underestimate how appealing you are to others. I'm not in love with you, and I wouldn't say you're Miss America material, but you are attractive, both as a woman and as my son's girlfriend. I know what boys like, she said, making a wide gesture with her hands. Maybe so, Dad replied, but exaggerated appearances can often look unnatural, especially depending on someone's build. Sure, there's a common idea of what's appealing, but it's not the only way people are drawn to each other. You wear your hair that way because you think it's flattering, right? Sure, and it is. But something completely different, like long straight hair down to the waist, is also something people find appealing. The point is, attraction isn't one size fits all. When Erin first liked you, you turned him down, didn't you? Dad remembered that? Did he have to bring it up? Well, I was seeing someone else. Which means Erin wasn't the only one to show interest. Have you ever gone long without attention from the opposite sex? Back in 8th grade, I would have loved a little attention. Sure, but 8th grade boys aren't exactly the best benchmark, Dad said. And maybe someone liked you then and just never said anything. But anyway, we're talking about whether you're appealing now. Were you the same back then? No, but... So your point doesn't really apply. The truth is, people find different things attractive. That comment you made about what boys like really oversimplifies things. You like Erin, right? You're not just dating him because the football team's unavailable? Well, Erin's stronger than he looks. Maybe, but he's not an athlete. And did you notice that strength before or after you started dating him? Much later. Exactly. Stereotypes don't explain everything. People don't always fall into those neat categories. One of the things Erin likes about you is your intelligence. And yes, there's a stereotype that some women hide their smarts because it supposedly drives men away. Some guys do get intimidated by that. Erin's not one of them. At least someone was standing up for him. Well, he might still feel a bit challenged. Not right now, since this isn't a date, but I've watched him over the past 2 years. He's dating someone impressive. I'm nowhere near as smart as he is. He makes the dean's list, after all. Well, he may be better at classwork than you are, but you don't put the emphasis on it that he does. What did he tell me? You're vice president of your sorority? Of the chapter. The sorority is a national organization. The chapter is 50-some women on one campus. Well, still, that takes work, doesn't it? Over and above the work your average member puts in? Aaron studies, and I applaud that. Past chapter vice president isn't going to go on your transcript. But, leaving that aside, my estimate of your intelligence comes more from your success with my daughters. You're very kind, but you're underestimating your son. Last spring, as a favor to me, he tutored 3 sisters who were in trouble in college math. All 3 were helped tremendously. Marissa might overestimate his intelligence, but at least he knew she was on his side. Well, you'll have to visit more often. I hadn't heard about that. Aaron answers my direct questions, but he seldom volunteers any information. Now, Aaron began. That was unfair. Well, that's my observation. You did introduce Miss Grant very politely. You didn't say why she was important in your life, but that she was clear. When are you doing to call me Marissa? When you call me Jim. The conversation went on. He enjoyed watching and listening to Marissa, but he was reduced to watching and listening every time she and Dad were together. She was his date, damn it. And, after dinner, when Dad went upstairs, she was his date. They had sweet kisses. Her mouth tasted faintly of the spices Mrs. Bryant used in the ham. He was careful not to mess her clothes, but she checked in the mirror of the downstairs bathroom anyway. Then he drove her home and had one more kiss on the front porch. Dad was watching the news when he got back. She was my date, you know, Dad. You didn't have to monopolize the conversation. Why, Aaron? That is remarkably selfish of you. First of all, it wasn't a date. She was, formally, my guest at dinner. More to the point, there were 3 people at table, thus 3 pairs. You have all the time she's willing to give you at school. If you had something to ask her or tell her, then you could have done that there. While you and I don't talk all that much, we have loads of opportunity. Besides which, the subject most on your mind, if seldom on your tongue, was present. The only pair at the table who don't have loads of time to talk to each other were Miss Grant and myself. Well, you didn't have to bring up her shape. All I did was call her attractive. Anything more specific was at her instigation. Attractive, of course, has implications of sexually desirable, but it's a term used in polite company and by women to describe other women. I didn't mention that you lusted after her, a fact which is as clear to her as it is to me, maybe even clearer. I merely mentioned that other men also were attracted, what attraction carefully unspecified, to her. The girl is less perfect than you think, and one of those imperfections is a serious case of self-deprecation. Great. He was trying to persuade Marissa to accept him, and Dad was trying to persuade her that she could do better. She may be out of my league, but she's out of yours, too. Really, you know, we aren't in competition. If we were, I'd have only one advantage over you with a girl of that age. And she does not strike me as a gold digger. Even if she were, of course, while she could do far better than you, she could do better than me, too. I am not courting Miss Grant as a mistress, as she is well aware, but as a daughter-in-law. Who said I was thinking of marrying her? Why, nobody has said it. I certainly didn't, though if you're not, you're a total jackass. The point, though, as she is well aware, is that I have no legitimate interest in entertaining her if she is merely your current date. While you may not have mentioned marriage to her, and considering your mutual status as students you probably shouldn't, she must realize that you are interested in her more than casually. How much more than casually? She doesn't have the knowledge of your background to assess. So, a concerned parent would naturally consider whether this will lead to the natural conclusion. And she is quite sensitive enough to see that. Interfering scumsucker. You probably shouldn't, indeed. Well, Aaron had mentioned it to Marissa, and there was nothing Dad could do about it. Graduation, paycheck, wedding, and he'd never tell the old man anything, not even the time of day, again. I don't see where it's any of your goddamn business. Well, I might point out that Miss Grant was happy to be welcomed into this house. It is my house. I gather that your reception at her home was less consistently cordial. Is that any of your business? Since Miss Grant seemed to refer to it, she seems to have thought that it was. Prioritize, my lad. Is your current relationship with me as important as your relationship with her is? If not, you need to play your best cards. And the fact that I welcome her, and that she enjoys my welcome is a positive you can use. Everything was about Dad, a legend in his own mind. But, he thought after he was in bed alone, Dad had been right about one thing. He had to play his best cards. If Dad was far less important than he thought, he probably was a positive in her mind. Aaron's parent approves of us, at least was. The girls were probably a greater positive, if only he could think of a way to use them. If he'd thought earlier, they would probably have been happy to send her Christmas cards. She talked a lot about his brain, or his GPA, which she confused with it. And she thought he was strong. He should go back to lifting the chair when she wasn't around. And, jealous as he felt towards them, he should remember to be kind to her sorority sisters. Great. All that should take him about 3 inches closer to his goal. That only left 5,279 feet and 9 inches to go. He was getting tired of this. When she didn't occupy his bed, Marissa monopolized his thoughts. Erin had planned to spring a suggestion on Marissa in church. She came alone and suggested that they sit with Dad, which fouled up the chances. Dad, though, headed for the exit immediately after the services were over. Usually, he waited for Erin to fetch the car when they were together. Look, he said to her in the hearing of people straggling out the aisles, the season is more or less over. I was thinking of heading back to campus and getting a jump on the quarter. What do you think of that idea? That sounds like a smart move. Why don't we go back down together? Sounds great. When? How about next Saturday? I'll tell Mom. We'll be in touch, then. He walked her to her car, and then went to where he'd parked Dad's car. Dad was sitting in the passenger seat, but he'd turned on the motor. He got in the driver's seat. Thanks, he said. Parting is such sweet sorrow. I thought you might have been longer. We're going to a restaurant. Debbie's okay? Fine. I thought I might go back to campus early. Get the books and stuff before the rush. Could you drive me to the train Saturday? Certainly. Does Miss Grant need a ride too? Or are you two going to meet at the station like you parted at the station? What makes you think? Erin, it's all right to think the old man is senile. It is almost mandatory at your age. It is, however, quite rude to act on that belief. If he was going to stay home a shorter amount of time, he had to cram the rest of the studying of the books he'd brought home into 1 week. The previous preparation on PDE had turned out to be helpful. He wouldn't be as far along at the beginning of the second quarter, but he'd do all right for the first weeks. The book on designing electronic circuits was heavier slogging. He really needed to hear the lectures on that. The grades were mailed to his home, and they came before they left. He had lucked out in Anthro and the motor course. That made 4 AS. The railroad car was about 1/3 full on the trip back, but they didn't see anyone they knew. The girls had sent long letters to Dad along with their gifts and photos. They'd finally figured out what pleased the old man. He told her about news from the letters. That led to his memories of the girls from before. He tried to get her to tell him about her history, but he suspected that he was getting a report from the shallows. Marissa had made 2 BS, an A, in teaching reading, and AC, in French literature and translation. He would have reminded her of how much her attention to Zeta cost her, if he wasn't conscious that she'd spent time with him, too. She made much of his straight A quarter. They stopped at the grocery in the trip from the train station to the apartment. Marissa insisted on carrying her books, his, and 1 bag of groceries up to the apartment. He carried their suitcases and the other grocery bag. He would have been willing to make 2 trips, but she was insistent. Once behind the locked door of the apartment, he was happy. They had a quite kiss before they'd removed their coats. She insisted on putting the groceries away before going to bed, but they stayed there for a long time. She seemed to have missed him almost as much as he'd missed her. She started cooking dinner after 11 o'clock. Their time was like that from then until Wednesday. Marissa insisted on cooking meals, and she wore her nightgown and robe when she was up. He dressed to shop with her lists, but wore nothing but his robe, if that, otherwise. They got loads of studying done, but spent the rest of the time in bed. Some of the bedtime was spent asleep, and delightful sleep with Marissa in his arms, except when she was hugging him from behind. Some of it was spent in sex, some of it was spent in making out or simple conversation. With her there all the time, he gave up on shaving with the blade. Even though Marissa would see him, he used the electric razor. Wednesday noon, she left him. He shouldn't feel deprived. They'd had nearly 3 glorious days of pretend marriage. Saturday evening, she called him to pick her up at the sorority. She could be with him whenever she wanted, but that seemed to break her schedule. He went and got her, and she started talking before he'd hung up her coat in the apartment. Remember that you said that you wanted me in your arms, even if we couldn't have sex? Sure. It's true. Well, I know that the pen set wasn't much of a Christmas present, she said. That's not true, he replied. It was thoughtful and I loved it. You never thought of a pen as anything more than a cheap way to draw a line, she teased. Well, that's the gift you have to tell everyone I gave you. You can't mention the other one. The other one? He asked, though he had an idea what she meant. Merry Christmas, she said softly. I'm here with you tonight. That time together felt like a true gift, quiet, meaningful, and affectionate. They sat close, exchanged gentle hugs and kisses, and held each other with a sense of calm and connection. There was no rush, no expectation, just the comfort of being together. She rested her head against him and gently reminded him not to lean against her too firmly. She was a bit sore from the day. On Sunday morning, they shared a quiet routine, getting ready for the day, making breakfast, and heading to church. I'm really glad we're going, Erin said on the way. I feel especially grateful today. When Marissa returned to the apartment Thursday evening after more than a week apart, Aaron was eager to make her feel welcomed. He greeted her with warmth and affection, brushing her cheeks with kisses and listening as she recounted her week. The closeness they shared wasn't just physical, it was emotional and steadying. Though they weren't formally a couple, their bond was clear even to others, including her sorority sisters. That Saturday, the sorority hosted a party for the new pledges. Marissa stuck by Aaron's side, and none of the girls asked her to dance. Pledges came over to introduce their dates to her, including Judy, who had previously been unsure of Aaron. But that night, she seemed more relaxed around both him and her date, likely comforted by the dynamic around her. Marissa, though only a little older than the pledges, clearly earned their respect. When the event ended, the sisters stayed behind to clean up. Marissa, ever responsible, felt the need to help, and Aaron stayed too. He wouldn't have let her remain alone on a Saturday night. His presence was appreciated by the sorority leaders. By the time they returned to the apartment, Marissa looked drained from the long evening. Aaron almost offered to carry her upstairs, but she made it on her own and went straight to bed. The understanding between them was simple: they would rest together. Nothing more was expected. Aaron slid into bed beside her and wrapped his arms gently around her. She relaxed into the warmth of his embrace, already drifting into sleep. "Tired?" he asked. "Not that tired," she murmured. "Wonderful, warm woman." Still, he didn't want to push her when she was worn out. Without shifting, he rested his hand on her shoulder, kissing the back of her neck softly. She took his hand, kissed his fingers gently, and he smiled, "Darling girl." He returned his hand to her shoulder, feeling her begin to tense slightly. She reached for him, but he caught her arm gently. "I'm on edge," he explained, not wanting to rush things. "You," she said, starting to shift. "Like this," he said, holding her until she relaxed. He adjusted, sliding closer and kissing the part of her neck he could reach. "Stay close," he whispered. She guided him into a comfortable embrace, and he settled against her warmth, kissing her softly. "Darling, love," he murmured. She was his love, his darling. He rested his hand gently on her side, savoring the moment. Her slight movements sparked warmth in him, and when she shifted closer, he couldn't help but deepen their connection, overwhelmed by her presence. "Love," he said, as they settled into each other. She was his love, and she fell asleep in his arms. He followed soon after, too content to linger awake. Sometime in the night, she slipped from his embrace but returned to snuggle back in. When the alarm rang, he took his bathroom time, shaving and brushing his teeth before returning to bed. She looked so sweet, so sleepy, he hesitated to disturb her. Since he'd answered the alarm first, he owed her a choice. He slid back into bed. "Rise and shine," he said, nuzzling her back gently. "Oomph," she groaned, glowing but reluctant to move. "Aren't we going to church?" "Do I have to?" "No. Want to stay in bed till noon?" Her sorority had Sunday dinner at 1 o'clock, with obligations after. "Yeah." Her answer warmed him, especially from such a captivating woman. He curled around her, stroking her shoulder gently, his touch light. "Want to sleep," she murmured, guiding his hand to a less distracting spot. He tightened his embrace, but stayed still. She slipped into the bathroom, later than her usual pill time. "Did you take your pill?" he asked. She checked her watch, grabbed her purse, and took the pill in the kitchen with water. When she returned to bed, she lay flat instead of curling into him. He tested if she'd allow a little closeness, resting his hand lightly on her shoulder. She seemed open to it, and he savored the warmth of her presence. When he slid under the covers to brush a kiss across her shoulder, he trailed his fingers gently along her arm. She was so relaxed, responding softly, so he settled beside her again, content to hold her close. "You know," he said quietly, "when I talked about you sleeping in my arms, I assumed I'd be asleep too. But it's even better when I'm awake, holding you like this." He wasn't sure if she was asleep, so he kept his voice soft, not wanting to wake her if she was. "Yeah, your own personal companion." She was awake and in a sarcastic mood. "You're charming, no denying that," he said. "But when you're resting in my arms, it gives me this feeling, maybe an illusion that you trust me." "Trust, huh?" "You're resting your hand on my shoulder to sell me that illusion. It'd feel more real if you moved it somewhere else." Actually, she was wrong. If she didn't mind his hand on her shoulder, that showed more trust than if it were somewhere less personal. "Well," he pointed out, "if I put my hand on your arm, you'd have to support its weight. On your shoulder, it's effortless." "Yeah, right. Got any bridges for sale?" Her sarcasm was playful, and she seemed in a good mood. They were skipping their usual routine, and he could tell she was enjoying the break as much as he was. "You think I'm scheming something?" he teased, lightly touching her arm. "I'm totally innocent, and I'd never do something like this." He gestured toward her cheek, pretending to lean in for a peck. She laughed, covering her face but not pushing him away. Things unfolded slowly. They were resting together after a long night, and he wasn't about to ask more of her than she felt ready to give. When she tensed slightly, she pulled him closer, holding him gently. He brushed his fingers along her arm, and when she relaxed into him, he whispered, "Marissa, darling." Her face showed a flicker of intensity, then calm. He held her gently, giving her a soft kiss as she drifted back to sleep. A little later, she stirred and turned to him for a kiss. Then she slipped into the bathroom. He put on his glasses to watch her move, appreciating her presence. When she returned, she kissed him again, her breath fresh with toothpaste. She seemed to welcome his hand resting lightly on her arm. When she tensed again, starting to fidget, she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You," she said softly. Yes, they'd had their break from the world, and this moment felt like their last for the morning. He wanted it to be special for both of them. She leaned into him, and he adjusted so they were comfortable, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. He watched her face as they stayed close, her expression shifting from warmth to curiosity, then to a hint of unease. Her hand slid along his back as she grew more thoughtful, her face showing a trace of concern. "Marissa," he said as her expression softened into calm, her body relaxing against him. He held her tightly, then let himself collapse beside her, both of them settling into a new spot on the bed. She got up and headed for the bathroom. When he heard the shower, he hung her robe on the door. Then he joined her for a quick shower. Their little escape was over, it seemed, because she dressed in everyday clothes and started cooking breakfast. He enjoyed watching her move around the kitchen. "I'm falling behind on my tasks," she said over breakfast, as if cooking on time was her responsibility. "You had a long night," he replied. "Besides, you were resting in my arms. That's the deal. Breakfast is a bonus." Though she acted like she was running late, they shared a cozy moment after eating, lingering before he drove her home for Sunday dinner. For the next 2 weeks, she kept her schedule. She stayed over Wednesday and Saturday nights, and they shared morning showers. She cooked Saturday dinner and 2 breakfasts. He would have preferred to skip Thursday breakfast for more time together, but he wanted to make sure she ate. "Something's come up," she said while he drove her to Zeta after church. "I can't do Wednesday. Is Tuesday okay?" She seemed tenser than the change warranted. "Tuesday's fine," he said. "Even better, since it's sooner." The shorter wait for Tuesday was offset by the longer wait until Saturday, but he didn't mind. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I wasn't fully honest. My period starts Thursday. I don't want to be at your place that close to it." Talking about it was progress, even if she wasn't comfortable staying over. He was determined to keep doing her laundry after they were married. "Tuesday's still fine," he said. "Thanks for being honest. Don't worry about my bed, I can wash the sheets. I don't mind if it's not a problem for you." Then he added, "Can you make Saturday?" "Sure, usual conditions?" "Darling, I love you. Any conditions." He enjoyed their time together, but what made it special was that she enjoyed it too. Her staying over, even without anything more, was a small compromise. On Tuesday, he picked her up at Zeta. After some kissing and hugging, she washed her face and came to bed. They shared a long, warm embrace, their skin touching. He kissed her forehead, cheeks, and down her neck. The room was cool, so they stayed under the blankets, her face peeking out. When she fidgeted playfully, he held her close, moving gently to keep her comfortable. After she relaxed, he slid beside her, holding her as they moved together in sync. They lay there afterward, him partially propped up but mostly resting against her. When she nudged him, he rolled off, and she got up. Later, he sat across from her, studying electronic circuit design. He thought her presence might distract him, but it was comforting. She was where she belonged, and so was he right across from his love. They studied late, but she was responsive when they went to bed. He watched her face light up as they cuddled, her body shifting against him. She gasped softly during a kiss, then relaxed as he held her close. On Saturday afternoon, he bought a small jar of Vaseline and set it on the nightstand, hoping she'd be open to some closeness. That evening, they shared a quick hug before she cooked dinner. After he cleared the table, she sat on his lap for a longer cuddle. Her shoulders were sore, but he could hold her waist without issue. Had he been too rough before? He'd been so focused on her comfort. From now on, he'd be more careful. Sitting with her on his lap felt just as good as holding her in his arms. They studied for a while. He'd finished his Monday and Tuesday assignments early, so he read ahead in PDE while she worked. In bed, they shared a long kiss. Even if it was all they did, it felt more intimate than a kiss leading to more. When she pulled back, he lay on his side, kissing her face and stroking her hair gently. He wanted more, but wasn't sure what she'd allow. "Look," he asked, "is it okay if I touch your hand? Is that too much?" "Aaron, it's not too much, it's just there." She hesitated. "It might be messy. So what? I can wash my hands. Is it really an issue?" She always framed things around his feelings, but he suspected some of it was about her own comfort, which he respected. If it's too much, I can stop? She nodded. He grabbed the Vaseline, explaining, I figured this might help if you're not feeling up for much. He wanted to be careful not to push her. When he was sure he wasn't making her uncomfortable, he kissed her deeply. He focused on her hand, moving gently. She responded more slowly than usual. Maybe it was the newness of the situation or her own hesitation. But she tensed, then relaxed, her breath catching as she leaned into him. His heart raced when she brushed against him, but he hoped she didn't think he was pushing for more. When he checked her face, she looked content, not suspicious. Was that okay? He asked. Aaron, it was wonderful. Can I do it again? She nodded without hesitation. As he started again, he asked, Are your shoulders too sore for a gentle touch? Try, she said. Darling. He focused on being gentle, and she responded beautifully, relaxing into him again and again. Suddenly, she nudged his arm away. Had he gone too far? Was I too rough? Aaron, you're never inconsiderate. I've reached my limit tonight. Her tone was gentle, expressing her boundaries with kindness. When she curled into his arms, his heart warmed. She fell asleep against him, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude for her trust. Sunday morning, Aaron got up first, brushing his teeth and shaving. She was waiting when he came out. He lingered, in case she wanted to use the bathroom too, though he would have loved a quiet moment to cuddle. She came out soon after. You sure you're not worried about the sheets? She asked with a little smile. I can wash them. It's how you feel that matters, he said. She smiled back. He picked her up gently and carried her to bed with quiet reverence. Darling, he whispered when they lay down. They shared a sweet kiss and a quiet moment of closeness. Their time together had a new sense of tenderness. The connection between them was deeper than words. He held her tightly and felt overwhelmed by how much she meant to him. You're so kind, so thoughtful, so lovely, he murmured. You really wanted that? She asked with a quiet laugh. He would have given up anything for a moment like this. Oh, darling. Let me go in there first, she said. This time she stayed longer, and he waited until he heard the water running. See, she said later, pointing to a small detail he hadn't noticed. When he stepped under the shower, it disappeared. You're the most wonderful woman in the world, he told her. I'll take that, she said with a grin. He smiled. Now I have something to be especially grateful for, he added as they reached the church parking lot. Fine, but don't tell the congregation what it is, she teased. He wouldn't, but he'd tell God when he found the right words. She was such a blessing in his life that he could only pray she might feel the same. God, he believed, cared for her too, maybe even more. He'd been taught that God loved everyone, no matter their flaws. The real question was, could he be good for her? He decided to pray not only for her acceptance, but for the strength to be the partner she deserved. Thursday okay this week? She asked as they drove to Zeta House. Only 2 days a week weren't workable, and that was just a constraint of their current lives. Fine, he said. Thursday was fine. So was Saturday. So was Sunday morning, especially when they sat close in church with their legs touching. He would have said the day couldn't get better, but then it did. I've been thinking, Marissa said as they drove away from church. Thinking about us. That's nice, he said. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one. I think my answer is yes. He braked quickly, overwhelmed. Does that mean what I think it means? If you still want to marry me in June of '78, I want to marry you too. If he were dead, he would have died happy. But he was very much alive and stunned. Oh, darling, I'll want to. What do you think is a proper length of engagement? Let's talk later. Maybe around Christmas break. Either just before or just after. That was fine. The public part, the formal announcement, was for her. What he truly wanted was to be by her side every night. Just warn me, she said. It should be formal, with you kneeling and a ring. His taste in jewelry was awful, and she'd be wearing it the rest of her life. You planning to do it in front of my sisters? She asked. That hadn't been the plan, but if she wanted it, he could wait. I was thinking of something more private, he said. Just the two of us. They shared another kiss on the steps, the kiss of a secretly engaged couple. He shelved the formal planning for now, but couldn't stop imagining what marriage would be like. It wasn't paradoxical she had said yes. The timing was flexible, but her word was good. She would be his wife. The real challenge was ensuring she would be a happy wife. He loved her too much not to care about her joy. Selfishly, he'd seen an unhappy marriage before and didn't want to repeat it. And most selfish of all, a big part of his own happiness came from seeing hers. He'd once said he didn't care what their home was like, but now he had a few quiet hopes. That the bedroom would be warm enough in winter for comfort, cool enough in summer to sleep in each other's arms. She had promised to be with him, but he never wanted to make her feel obligated. He wanted to earn her joy, not assume it. Again, he didn't want to extort sex from her. He wanted to have sex with her because she enjoyed it. He'd seen her too exhausted to have sex. She was going to be a school teacher, and she had all these quirks about housework. If she was going to have the energy for the important things, somebody else was going to have to do many of the chores she thought needed to be done. Unless his pay stretched to a housekeeper, and Marissa might think that they shouldn't have one even if they could afford one, that meant that he needed to do them. Fine. He was willing to do things much more onerous than sweeping the floor if the payoff was Marissa's writhing in his arms more often. He brought the subject up in words she could affirm one Wednesday evening as they sat down to study after dinner. You know, you said you would make a list of the household chores that will be my responsibility. You should make that list this quarter. Why? Yeah, he should have said why the lead time was important. Well, I'm going to have to learn almost all of them. The best time to learn would be this summer. If Mrs. Bryant doesn't teach me, you'll have to when we're married. Really, Aaron, you should know all the tasks. I'm never going to expect you to do all of them at the same time, but we might need to change them off. For a short time, you might need to do everything. What if I broke a leg? He didn't want to think of her hurting, much less damaged. And there will be different tasks to assign in different sorts of houses. Do you know how to mow the lawn? Actually, I do. Dad didn't think it was a job to assign a woman. Well, then make a list of the things I'll need to know. I'll try to learn them this summer. Not today. I have my study planned out. Well, he hadn't suggested anything that soon. Not today. This quarter. Actually, you could leave it till spring break. Well, that took care of chores. At least, it put off chores to another time. But there was more to making her happy. Some of it would be location. She had housing preferences, and she had only hinted at them. She so clearly believed that everybody had them, though, that she had to have her own. For that matter, her context for asking his was that they should check to see whether theirs were compatible. That, though, had to wait for the location. When they had decided where to live, she could find a house that suited her. She was on her own with regard to her employment, too. But, once she was in her employment, she shouldn't be ashamed of him. He knew one hell of a lot, not counting what he'd learned in classes. Her fellow teachers, especially her fellow English teachers, might not think so, though. They'd be liberal arts types, and those he saw on campus were snobs. Since they and their sort thought that they knew everything, what they didn't know, and many of them had never even heard of Kepler's 3 laws, was not true knowledge. It was some kind of specialized information not worthy of them. Well, he didn't want Marissa ashamed of him or defending him among her fellow teachers. He should learn enough of what they knew that they wouldn't think him ignorant. That shouldn't be too difficult. He could ignore pedagogy, which was half of what she had studied beyond distribution courses. And he had what the university said was enough of those. Mostly, he'd have to read literature, which was a snob's kind of fiction. Heinlein could write better than most of the guys he'd read in lit books. Probably he would give them a run for their money after a lobotomy. Even so, literature wasn't painful to read, and you didn't really have to learn anything or think differently. So, he'd read the lit that would impress her friends. Probably, he should get on top of the lit she'd be teaching first. Before offering that, he brought up what he wanted. Well, she'd agreed, and nothing would make her as happy as that would make him. On the other hand, he should do something to make her happy. You'll lie in my arms every night when we're married? She was going to sleep in his arms that night. Yeah, he kissed her head. That was enough for that night. Do different schools use different stories in their lit books? He asked the next morning while they were in the car going to church. Yeah, mostly. When we're married and you're teaching lit, would you want me to read the stories you'll be teaching? Maybe. I'll be out of school. I'll be working, but probably not having much assigned reading. If you want, I'll read what you teach. Should I read all the Shakespeare plays? I've only read Macbeth and Lear. They got to the church without her answering. What's this about reading literature? She asked in the car after church. I didn't quite get it. Well, you'll be in my arms every night. You agreed to that, so that's what I get. If doing a few chores isn't enough, what else will you want? I figure you wouldn't want to be married to someone who doesn't understand your work. Aaron, it would mean a lot if you took an interest in my career. But I don't want it to feel like a chore. Well, getting to know you better seems like part of being married. And it wouldn't hurt if I didn't seem clueless to your coworkers. That would help make a good impression. You're sweet, she said quietly, before they shared their goodbye kiss. He figured she'd think about it. Marissa also began talking about what their married life might look like. He didn't tell her that every idea she had sounded wonderful to him. It showed she was becoming more certain that marriage was in their future. She'd said it out right before, but now she was thinking practically about how it would work. We could start by living in an apartment, she suggested, and then buy a house once we're sure where we want to stay and have the money saved for a down payment. And we'll both share in economic decisions? Sure. Well, he'd agree to most of her ideas there. Let's get to the important thing. Sure. You'll sleep in my arms every night. Aaron, did he sound like he was doubting her word? He really wasn't. I don't doubt you. I just like to hear you say it. I'll sleep in your arms for every night of our married life. You're a darling. Now, all he had to do was to keep her married to him. and keeping her happy was almost certainly sufficient and quite likely necessary. When spring break loomed, he suggested staying on campus. She agreed readily. Dad expected him home, and he should call. Look, Dad, I'm not coming home spring break. I'm going to stay down here and read ahead in my texts. Well, I'll see you when classes end, then. Yeah, as a matter of fact, could you pick up an app from the hardware store and mail it to me? Sure. Have a nice time. Give my regards to Miss Grant. What makes you think she'll be here? At that the old man laughed. It was an awfully long and somewhat forced laugh, and on his dime, too. When classes were over, Aaron picked Marissa up at the Zeta house. She was waiting for him by the door, and he greeted her with a warm hug before grabbing her things and carrying them to the car. Once in the apartment, he lifted her again, smiling, before they started getting comfortable for the evening. He opened the closet door so they could use the mirror, then paused to ask. Too cold? He felt the apartment was warm enough, but Marissa tended to be more sensitive to chilly air. Nice and warm, she said, joining him at the mirror. They stood together, quietly watching their reflections and sharing the moment. You're beautiful, Aaron said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. They stayed like that for a while, enjoying each other's company and the quiet comfort of being close. Eventually, Marissa leaned into his arms, and he held her, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. I love you, he whispered. It wasn't just about her outward beauty, it was her spirit, her presence. She smiled at him, her eyes full of warmth. Later, he helped her to a spot where she could lean against the wall for support while they continued talking and laughing. They were both feeling a bit silly and affectionate, and the mirror gave them an added sense of shared intimacy, not physical, but emotional, a moment of lighthearted togetherness. Darling, he said again, overwhelmed by how much he cared for her. As the evening wound down, they curled up together on the floor, not saying much, just resting. Eventually, Marissa stood up and went into the bathroom. Aaron, still a bit tired, headed to bed. She joined him a little later and lay down beside him. It's a little warm for this close of a hug, she said gently. When we're married, we'll have to make sure the bedroom is properly air-conditioned, he replied with a grin. Then Marissa, in a more serious tone, asked, Aaron, you haven't dated anyone else since we started seeing each other, have you? No, I've never had a serious relationship before this. Well, just know if that ever changes in the future, it would be a deal breaker for me. I'm not okay with emotional or physical cheating. Even something like kissing another woman would mean sleeping on the couch. That's fair, Aaron said. I don't want anyone else, anyway. She softened. Of course, I'm not counting relatives or friendly gestures. Kissing your grandma is fine. Aaron laughed. Good to know. Changing the subject, she said, remember the list of chores I asked you to learn? I think now's a good time to go over it. He groaned, half joking. Really? Now, you said you wanted to hold me at night. To get to that point, we've both got to contribute. She got out of bed, put on some jeans and slippers, and sat down at the table with a pencil and paper. Want me to pack your laundry while you write? Aaron asked. Yeah, I feel a little strange having you do it, but sure. She handed over her dirty clothes. Aaron didn't see why she felt odd. It was something that needed to be done, and he was happy to do it. I said I'd take care of the chores when we're married, he reminded her. That includes laundry. As he loaded everything up, including the sheets and pillowcases, he felt satisfied. He headed to the laundromat, started the machines, then hurried back. Forget something? She asked when he returned. Nope, just remembered something, he said, giving her a kiss. They shared a moment of quiet affection before she handed him the list. He skimmed it and noted. Clean. Vacuum rugs, windows, kitchen surfaces, tub and sink, toilet, dishes, laundry, sweep, cook. He scratched out cook from the cleaning section and made it its own category. I won't be able to learn everything this summer, especially not all the meals Mrs. Bryant makes, he told her. I'll be working at the hardware store most days. You're right, she replied, thinking it over. Why don't you learn the basics, lunches and snacks? I'll handle the main meals and fancier stuff. Deal. They shared another kiss before he returned to switch the laundry to the dryer. When he came back again, Marissa had started cooking, and it made Aaron smile. Watching her move around the kitchen, he realized again just how happy he was in her presence. He emptied out the laundry onto the bed, put away his own clothes, and left hers until she gave the go-ahead. Her spaghetti was delicious, doubly so because he'd seen her make it. After dinner, she sat on his lap for a kiss, then got up to put her clothes away. They spent the rest of the evening studying side by side. Being near her, just near her, made it easier to focus. Her presence wasn't a distraction, it was a comfort. Without any demands from the next day, they went to bed early. Remembering his interrupted trip up her backbone, he kissed her from coccyx to skull before she turned over. Not needing a sheet, she writhed in his sight 3 separate times. He was stroking her towards the 4th when she promised, without any prompting on his part, his dearest wish. Aaron, every night of our marriage, I'll sleep in your arms. Oh, darling, I love you. He couldn't express how much he loved her right then. Then come here and prove it. Proving it meant entering her sweetness. And that only made him love her more. He exploded as she writhed under him and around him once more. Afterwards, he covered them with a sheet, and she did sleep in his arms. The morning was even better. With no external demands. With his ejaculation of the night before reducing his internal demands, he slowly stroked in her until the forceful rise of her groin against his made him speed up. They came at the same instant and eased back down to doze together. She made a late breakfast. Afterwards, they set out hand in hand with some books for the campus. They were going to enjoy the weather outside. She lay with her head in his lap, and at first, he read her some poetry. Then she sat up, and they each read their own book. The walk home was hand in hand. She made him a snack. Your peanut butter sandwiches taste much better than mine do, he told her. And it wasn't just that he could watch her make them. Do you use jelly when you make them? No. They were peanut butter sandwiches, not jelly sandwiches. Well, could you eat another whole one? Sure. See, PB on one slice, jelly on the other. Then you put them together and cut it down the middle. They ate. She only had half a sandwich. Sure, she was trim, but she didn't really seem to eat enough to sustain that minimal weight. You can make your own snacks when I'm not here, and you can make them and share them with me when we're married. He liked that last suggestion, and she seemed to like the idea enough to come into his arms for a long kiss. They'd share a bed when they were married. Would they have this sort of fully clothed standing cuddle, too? Then they got back to work. Aaron was determined to support Marissa's study habits better than her sorority environment ever had. He wanted her to feel confident in her choice to spend the week with him. Their study sessions were productive, and dinner, which she cooked, was delicious. But for Aaron, the most treasured moments were the quiet, personal times they shared. They spent the evening enjoying each other's company, talking, laughing, and exchanging affectionate gestures. Their time together, whether cuddled under the blankets or simply holding hands, was a deep source of happiness. When she pulled him closer and rested against him, he kissed her forehead and held her until they both fell asleep. The next morning, though the energy was slower, the warmth between them remained. They shared tender gestures, soft touches, and unspoken understanding. Later, they got ready and walked to church, sitting close, maybe too close to appear entirely modest, but clearly happy to be beside each other. She came home with him afterward, choosing his apartment over her sorority, which made him quietly glad. Watching her cook dinner was a joy in itself, and the meal tasted even better because of her presence. Afterward, they studied again until supper. When the dishes were done, they took a walk through the warm, darkening streets, hand in hand. There was a peaceful rhythm to their day that made everything feel just right. Later, when they went to bed, she surprised him by guiding how they curled up together. At first, he didn't quite understand, but he followed her lead. She held him close, brushing her hair out of her face, her smile full of mischief and affection. He rested with his hands at her waist, simply appreciating the moment. Her comfort with him, and his admiration of her warmth, her beauty, her strength filled the space between them. They lay together quietly afterward, and Aaron felt deeply at peace. Watching her move, laugh, and think it all made sense. The connection they shared, especially that week, felt like something worth holding on to. Darling. And he grabbed his darling and pulled her down into his arms. This way, they didn't have to worry about his weight. He held her as their breaths slowed. He was shrinking, and when he came out, some of his jism followed. You're getting the mess on you, she said. So he was, but that didn't matter. Stay like this. She didn't try to move off, but she wriggled a bit, wriggled delightfully, too. Roll a little, she said. When he did, she straightened her legs. Then she lay quietly on him. Oh, Marissa, I love you, he said while caressing her back. You'll never be able to sleep like this. Try me. You are adorable. But she soon moved off. She came into the spoon when she did, though. In the morning, they returned to bed from separate bathroom times. She writhed delightfully under his hand, his mouth, and his hand again. When he tried his hand for one more time, though, she left him. She dressed slowly without going for a shower first. The dressing was clearly an erotic demonstration. Her dressing and undressing were always a turn-on. That she was trying for that effect, though, somehow made this time less so in some ways. She taught him how to make lunch. She used the same teaching method as Mrs. Bryant used. She did all the thinking, and he did all the muscle work, not that there was much muscle involved in making coleslaw and sloppy joes. She cleared after lunch and didn't seem to want him to wash them dishes then. They did a little cuddling and a lot of studying between lunch and dinner. They took another stroll through town after dinner and then studied for a couple of hours. They were behaving so well as students that it was ridiculous of her parents to object to their being married as students. Marissa wouldn't want to leave her sorority, though. Then, too, being really married meant his supporting her. Still, he'd be happy in an unreal marriage for a year, if it was followed by a real one. He cared deeply for her. If he couldn't have her all the time, he would cherish whatever moments they had together. Once they were alone and comfortable, he held her close without letting go until she gently pulled him in. Then he embraced her firmly, holding her close until she relaxed in his arms. When he finally came back to himself, he felt a slight urge to apologize. It wouldn't have been very sincere, and he chose not to pretend Marissa, like everyone else, could see through that. Since she didn't resist, she couldn't have been upset. The next morning, when Marissa came back from the bathroom, she kissed him. The fresh taste of her toothpaste reminded him he probably needed to freshen up himself. As soon as she left, he went to the bathroom to shave. He usually used a blade on Friday nights and mornings, saving the electric razor for other times. But today his face felt raw, so he used the electric razor. When he returned to bed, she joked about his shaving routine. "So, the man I love is all pretense. And here you were talking about makeup." "Well, you don't need makeup to look beautiful," he replied. "I just need a shave to feel ready for a kiss." She smiled and seemed to enjoy the kiss. Afterward, he suggested she turn over. He kissed her gently along her back. When she moved around with a smile, he admired her relaxed and happy expression. But when he tried to get closer, she playfully pushed him away. "Let me up," she said. "I need to start the day with a shower." As he heard the water running, he went to join her. "When we're married," she said, "we won't be able to start the day like this anymore." "That'll be a problem," he admitted. "But this is vacation, we don't have to punch a time clock. When we're both working, we'll have to figure something else out. Unless we set the alarm really early. Forget that for now. Today, I'm going to teach you how to make toasted cheese sandwiches." "Funny how one reminds me of the other," he said with a smile. "At least, a toasted cheese sandwich reminds me of you. You're both crisp on the outside." He touched her ear lightly to show a particularly crisp spot. "And warm and comforting on the inside." "You have a funny mind," she said, but smiled. "Then let me join you under the shower." They passed each other, slipping a little, and the simple moment felt wonderful. After their morning study session, she taught him how to make toasted cheese sandwiches. They had them for lunch, and once again, she left the dishes in the sink. She'd told him before that she didn't expect dishes after every meal. Did that still apply when they ate together? "When we're married, do you think you'll be able to fix lunch?" she asked. "Sure, when we're home. These are hot lunches, I'm guessing we won't be bringing them to work." "Well, Sloppy Joes work for supper too, even if they're simple. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to make tuna fish salad. That's a cold lunch, you can pack it ahead." That made more sense to him. If he understood correctly, and he wasn't sure, since Mrs. Bryant's leftovers never lasted long, it was something you could make once a week and use for sandwiches over a few days. "Yeah, Mrs. Bryant used to fix that usually on Saturdays. Sometimes she packed it for my lunch." He smiled. "When we're married, we'll have to make our own food, but we'll have all week to get it done. And with any luck, we'll do it together. That'll be even better than just watching you cook." After dinner, they went for another walk, then spent 2 hours studying. When Marissa went to the bathroom, he put away the books and washed the dishes. But she went back to her studies even after he went to bed. He didn't want to cut into her study time, so he watched her quietly. Eventually, she packed up for the night. "Turn on the lamp, will you?" she asked from the doorway. She walked into the light, removed her blouse, and took it to the closet. She tidied up deliberately, hanging things neatly. It seemed like she was trying to make a statement. He didn't say anything, just watched her with quiet admiration. "You're charming even when you're not trying," he said softly, smiling. "Oh, I don't know what you mean," she replied playfully. "You're impossible," he said, shaking his head. They shared a warm moment before settling in. He pulled her close as they drifted off to sleep. In the morning, he had first turned in the bathroom and waited outside until she finished her shower. "I'm going to miss this," he said as they stood together. "Oh, is it the showers you'll miss?" she teased. "Among other things. I'll miss being with you." "Being with me how?" she asked, half joking. "Just having you around. Being near you. Waking up next to you." "Well, starting June of '78. She trailed off. It felt far away. And summer would be long and dry. And his hardware job wouldn't cover much in the way of travel or lodging. "Well, it can't be helped," he said. "I wish it could be sooner." She clearly meant it, though he wished it even more. "Would your parents consider helping with your tuition if we were married?" he asked carefully. Her silence told him what he needed to know. It didn't seem fair she got to choose her major, her clothes, her activities, but not the timing of her marriage. The weather had cooled, so they wore sweaters on their walk to campus. This time, they didn't take books. Once again, he sat on a bench and she lay with her head on his lap. He was thoughtful. "It's odd, really," he said, thinking aloud. "They're already paying your tuition, plus food and housing." He stopped short of saying he could maybe manage that himself. He wasn't sure. If they were to live together, they'd need a better place. His father had warned him about that. Your dad warned you about me living with you? When I said I wanted an off-campus apartment, he asked if it was for you too. He said you might visit a place like that, but you'd never call it home. He thinks you've got good taste. You told your dad I might live with you? I didn't say it directly, but he's not clueless. He knows how much I care about you. When I told him I was staying on campus for the break, he said to give you his regards. When I asked why he thought you'd be here too, he just laughed. My mom asked if you were staying. I guess we haven't been as discreet as we thought. I think my intentions were obvious the moment I introduced you to him. I hadn't done that with anyone else, at least not since I could drive. Usually, it's the guy who has to meet the girl's parents, not the other way around. Well, she said, my dad wouldn't have paid half the rent even if I hadn't been committed to Zeta. I don't know what dad was suggesting exactly, maybe covering the full rent. I could maybe handle the current place for 2 years. I've budgeted extra for food and car repairs. The trouble with repairs is that they're unpredictable, nothing for ages, then suddenly a huge bill. But tuition, that's the real obstacle. And it wouldn't be an issue unless I wanted to live with you. He paused. Which I do. Would your dad keep paying your tuition if you were married? If I were married? Probably. If it were to you? Definitely. You don't know how much he respects you. He always said he couldn't leave us much, but he'd make sure we got a solid education, me and my sisters. Well, I could work next year. Once you're working as an engineer, you could afford my tuition. No, he said firmly. You're going to graduate. Taking a year off wouldn't help. Your grades are fine, and the university doesn't mind a C or 2. You're already one of the most focused students on campus. I don't think I could find a job nearby. Anyway, it's a college town, not an engineering hub. If I left, you wouldn't come back next fall. That's true, he admitted. Also, what would it look like to school boards? You're going to graduate on time. He paused. We've got almost 3/4 of a degree each. There must be a way to use that as collateral for a loan. Spoken like a banker's son, she said with a smile. Yeah, but Dad would say it's worthless as collateral, which means it isn't really collateral. It hadn't been a fight. They wanted the same thing and were frustrated by the same obstacles. Still, it cooled the mood of their walk. They went home to study not long after. She taught him how to make tuna salad sandwiches, though the way she sliced them made them prone to leak. Then, they returned to their books. Aaron Turner found the rest of the week of spring break fun, but less fun than the first half had been. Marissa seemed distracted when he wanted to cuddle while they were dressed, and, in bed, insisted that he come into her after she'd had only 2 climaxes under his hand or mouth. They didn't try anything more in front of the mirror or with her on top. It was a far cry from celibacy, but it was more restricted than he had hoped for from the week. The pleasure of discussing their future married life also seemed drained. What he really wanted for sure was a marriage that would begin earlier than they would actually begin theirs. Somehow, any mention of the marriage would bring that frustration to his mind. So, he stopped mentioning the marriage. So, for a while, did she? Friday, he was waiting in bed while she took her bathroom time. Look, Aaron, are you doing to participate this morning? She suddenly asked from the bathroom door. He didn't really trust his erection. I thought maybe tonight. Fine. Let's make a date for tonight. She went back inside. When he heard the shower, he joined her. She looked unwelcoming enough that he washed only himself. After breakfast, though, she kissed him. Taking that as permission, he lifted her so she was standing on the chair. They had a great time cuddling before he did the breakfast dishes. You know, she said, you could do them once a day. When you're here. She'd said something like that earlier, but he figured that the cleaning up was to please her. Once we're married, I'll always be here, or at least there. Well, that topic was mentionable again. Yeah, and you'll be in my arms every night from June of '78 until I die. He accepted the wait, even if it was a little hard. Every night. Aaron, for all your faults, you're sweet. You're the sweet one. He smiled and gently ruffled her hair before turning back to his studies. After lunch, she stopped him from washing the dishes again. Come here, she called from the bed. She was fully dressed and sitting there, but it felt nice to be invited. She motioned for him to lie down, and he did. He looked up at her kind face, feeling grateful. What courses are you planning to take next year? She asked, playing with his hair. That question opened the floodgates. Well, when you get this far along, things open up. So much is a prerequisite that I couldn't have taken many courses if I delayed some of the basics. Also, AP Calculus in high school, despite all the headaches it caused, will really free me up next year. Partial differential equations is normally a senior course, so I can take 1 more course or 3 more if they're just quarter classes than some others. I've told you that electrical engineering splits into branches? She looked a bit unsure. You've mentioned it before, but I'm not sure I fully understood. Well, he said, you have a clock and a radio. A clock radio, actually, she replied. That's the point, they're 2 different things. A clock runs on electricity that powers the motor to move the hands. It's a tiny amount of power, but electricity can do that. It can run motors ranging from tiny clock motors to powerful ones that move trains, and even more powerful motors used in industry. That's one branch. And the radio is the other branch? See, she was smart. Yeah, information. Each radio frequency conveys another set of information as to what sounds were made back in the radio studio. TV is a bit more complicated, and computers are nothing more than processing information. Now, information used to be processed by vacuum tubes. You started out with a little current, and that allowed more of a bigger current to flow. Now, it's done with transistors. And that's what I'm mostly studying next year, transistors. So, when you graduate, you'll know all about transistors? Probably nobody knew all about anything, but transistors were less known then. For example, planetary orbits. As if. It's like counting Chinese. This might not be clear. They're inventing and discovering more about transistors faster than schools can teach it. And, really, I'm not learning all about transistors. You ever hear of a black box? Tell me. Now he was back teaching the prerequisite courses. He might complain about distribution requirements in the humanities and social sciences, but at least they gave people like him some useful vocabulary. You couldn't become an engineer without hearing about things like gerunds and the rump parliament. Meanwhile, someone training to be an English teacher might never learn anything about engineering or much about science at all. Well, we use that kind of thinking a lot in engineering design. You take something someone else has built. You don't necessarily look inside it. You just understand how it responds to input, and you use that. You treat it like a mysterious black box. You have to, if you want to design anything within a reasonable amount of time, even in other fields. For example, an architectural engineer knows the bearing strength of a steel beam without understanding the metallurgy behind it. Did you take driver's ed? He asked. My dad taught me, she said, a bit puzzled. Well, he probably didn't start by explaining the internal workings of an engine or the details of brake systems. He taught you the basics like turning the steering wheel to change the direction of the tires, stepping on the gas pedal to go faster, and the brake pedal to slow down. It's the same concept of a black box. It doesn't matter why it works that way. It just matters that you know it does. I won't be designing transistors. I'll be designing devices that use them. It's like driving a car versus building one. If you say so, she replied, signaling that her attention had drifted. Well, he could still learn if he couldn't get her fully engaged. What about you? I'll tell you. They didn't teach any of that fleurs de mal when I went to high school, neither at Gordon nor at ETHS. Well, I have a double major. You knew that. Remember when you taught college math? Yeah, he sure hadn't forgotten in less than a year. Donna asked how well you'd done in it, and you said that you'd never taken it in that form. You looked like a teacher because you knew more math than was in this course. Same with lit. Lit teachers study more lit than they're going to teach. So, I'm never going to teach Baudelaire. It's a shame, though. The whole class would read that section. Anyway, she took a breath, which did interesting things to his view. Anyway, she continued, having an English degree will help me get a job as an English teacher, and English majors have lots of choices about classes. Ed majors are more like engineers. There are so many things you have to take that you don't have all that many choices within the field. And there are two groups making rules for education. You have to take these courses to get a degree and those courses to get certificated. The last word triggered an old complaint. If engineers used certificated to mean certified, English teachers would sneer at them. Maybe. Anyway, the two lists aren't that different. One thing is that you need to take Illinois history to teach in the state. A lot of other states have similar requirements. I'll take it next year. Then, you'll get a job in Kentucky, and I'll have to take Kentucky history. Maybe, maybe not. If she wanted to stay in-state, he'd probably be able to. Well, they discussed that when he had offers to discuss. Look, I expect to get a fair number of offers. That's what happens every year. The companies come recruiting. You go down to interview with the ones which look promising, and some of them make you an offer. All right, we'll look at those offers together. Where you live means where you teach. I could get a job in Gary and live in Illinois, but not a job in San Francisco. So, where you want to live and teach is part of how we evaluate the job offers. Everybody does that. Everybody sensible, that is. Part of what you consider is what they'll pay, but part of it is what you'll work on and your future prospects, and part is where you want to live. So, some guys will be favoring the places which have great skiing within reach. I'll be favoring those where you'll be happy. I won't tell them. After all, the company only has a set number of locations to offer. They couldn't change them. But I'm going to consider your happiness as much more important than the starting pay. For that matter, you might consider having more money to spend better than getting a lovely school to teach in. That, however, will be your choice. Aaron, you're sweet. She was hearing more than he was promising. Not all that sweet. I won't go back to being a hardware clerk to get you your preferred school district. Actually, of course, what he had originally wanted from engineering work was an opportunity to work on puzzles. The pay was a secondary consideration. But he had another, much more general question. Change of subject. The way I picture it is for me to commute farther and for us to live close to your school, maybe in the district. That's just picturing it. Maybe you'll see a house you love across the street from the plant, but it's not likely. There was a long silence. You look pensive, he said when it had gone on long enough. You're a much nicer man than the society allows you to be. Which was not only overpraise, it was a logical contradiction. If you really believe that, you're as in love with me as I am with you. Assuming that Dad's claim was correct that the beauty he saw in her was exaggerated by his love for her. Of course, I'm in love with you, but your head is so full of deep thoughts that it's getting heavy. Time for some more study. So, they returned to the table and their books. Sunday night, she asked him to get her to Abbott Hall 15 minutes earlier than her classes began the next morning. They made it easily. Instead of getting out of the car, even instead of a goodbye kiss, she turned to him and gave what sounded like a rehearsed speech. Look, I know my parents. If they have a choice between paying my tuition as a married woman and paying it as a single woman, they'll choose the second guaranteed. So, if we want to be married this year, what we have to tell them is that if they won't pay my tuition, I'll drop out and go to work. The bottom line is that we'll be married. But we have to mean it. They may well say no, no, no until August. And if they do, we'll have to be married. I'll have to have a job. They may actually say no, no, no and mean it. That's our risk. But it's our one hope. Love you. Goodbye. She ran into the hall. He'd parked the car already, and he could probably have caught up with her. That would have looked too much like coercion, though. She'd left him a lot to think about. Around his classes, he thought about it. She knew her parents. People, in general, were such a mystery to him that he'd have been tempted to trust her judgment even on his own family. Say that her evaluation of her parents was correct. Then they would be risking her future against a year of his pleasure. That was just too great a risk. It was his own fault for bringing the earlier wedding up. After all, he'd gone through 20 years without having Marissa in his arms, 17 of them without having seen her. 1.5 more years shouldn't be a problem. Well, she had left books at his apartment. She'd left clothes, too, but those were hostages guaranteeing her return. She'd need the books Tuesday. He brought them over to Zeta House Monday night after dinner. 78, he said when he handed them to her. Then he left just as she had left him. But he did go back on Wednesday night. They had a date, after all. She gave him a kiss and her books to carry. 77, she said in the car. Well, she hadn't said 77 or never. They had been arguing lately, but not in a way that would break them apart. So, what should we do first, argue or make peace? She laughed. It wasn't really a funny issue. I want to marry you, he said, but I don't want your education to suffer because of it. You say you love me, but you always add some condition to us getting married. Always. I only remember this one, he replied. You said you didn't want me to feel like I had to marry you. And I don't. It's not about anything external, it's about what you want. I want you to choose me because you truly want to, not because you feel pressured. I remember that, she said. And if you felt the way I do, you'd marry me this spring. That's not fair, he said. You mean the world to me. But this is about making sure you don't have to give up your future. I do love you, he continued, but the cost might be too high. You're making a romantic choice, but I'm thinking about your long-term well-being. She said nothing while they got out of the car and went up to the apartment. Once inside, she offered, let's continue the argument later. She really was special. Her values often aligned with his. He hugged her warmly. I love you, he said. As they spent time together, the mood softened. They laughed, held each other, and shared quiet moments. Still, the unspoken questions hovered over them. Every night, he said. I'd hold you every night. Every night starting this June, she responded. All you have to do is say yes. Well, saying yes is easy, it's what follows that's hard. I'd have to watch the person I love put her dreams on hold. Maybe wait tables instead of pursuing her goals. It's not a bad trait, she said. We'd be starting our life together a year early. And there's only a chance I'd have to take a job like that. My mom might not even pull my tuition. But she might, he said. And isn't it your dad who actually pays the bills? They decide together. And they both don't approve of you. So they'd both need to change their minds. That's not easy. Plus, with my brother heading to college next year, they may be less willing to keep funding me. You're not being fair, she said eventually, though she knew she wasn't being completely fair herself. How am I being unfair? You're making everything feel perfect and emotional and then expecting me to think rationally right after. Well, he replied gently, maybe it's unfair, but it's not intentional. They both smiled. There was warmth between them, even through disagreement. Aaron, she teased, I doubt anyone's going to nominate you for Sunday School Teacher of the Year. You think? He said with a smirk. She kissed him, then stopped his hand as he reached toward her. Let's take a break, she said. We've got studying to do. She got up and dressed completely before they sat down with their books. He stayed in jeans and a t-shirt, still half distracted. It would mean being with me every night, she said across the table. It would mean giving up your student life for at least a year, he replied. It would mean working retail or waiting tables. You worked retail. It didn't damage you. That's different. I didn't have to choose between learning and working. Maybe I'm stronger than you think. Or maybe already too warped to notice, she joked. Their argument kept looping around, but it never got truly heated. It wasn't anger, it was love and fear, clashing. Later, they curled up together again, no longer arguing, just appreciating the quiet presence of one another. When she arrived Saturday during her period, she didn't want close physical contact, but she still came over. Being there was a gift in itself. They stopped by the grocery store and bought supplies. While dinner cooked, she sat in his lap. He kept his hands respectfully placed, and they kissed, simply enjoying the closeness. The lasagna was delicious. Afterwards, he did the dishes and they studied together again. As they packed away their books, she paused in the doorway. Are you sure? I'm sure I want you here with me, he said. Are you sure you want to be here? She went to bed, and he joined her shortly after. They cuddled quietly. He held her close and watched her relax. In the morning, he dropped her off early. His class started at 9, hers at 10. Saturday was quiet. She didn't feel well, but still wanted to spend time together. That mattered more to him than anything. They read, cooked, and talked. The connection stayed strong. I'd love it if you stayed in bed all day, he admitted at one point. Skipped your lunch. Skipped everything. She smiled, understanding the emotion behind the words. Do you want me to change the sheets before you come back to bed? Come back? You'd want me to? Hell yes, he said. Always. If you can handle it, I can too. Well, handling it made it sound more difficult than it was for him, and he held himself to a higher standard when it came to her comfort. But he'd offered her a choice, and she had made it. Besides, he didn't want her to think he was bothered by something so natural. He kissed her when she got in beside him. Their kiss deepened for a moment, slow and affectionate. He held her gently, mindful of her sensitivity, brushing her shoulders and neck with tender care. She had made clear some boundaries, and he was careful to respect them. His touch was meant only to comfort, to let her know he was there and fully present with her. She began to relax and leaned into him. Now, Aaron, she said with quiet conviction. He responded with warmth, matching her pace. It wasn't about rushing or intensity, it was about being close and attentive. I love you, he said, holding her close. I love you too. I know. This is really kind of you. He meant it not just for the moment, but for her willingness to be open and emotionally vulnerable with him. As they lay together, quiet and connected, their mutual affection felt stronger than ever. He cherished how she smiled up at him, and how they seemed so in sync. They held each other, resting in that quiet connection, until she stirred. Wait here, she said, stepping away briefly. He stayed behind, unsure of what kind of closeness was okay right now, so he gave her space. But when she finished in the bathroom, he helped dry her off with a towel, careful and gentle. She made them breakfast, which was delicious. They even managed to get to church on time. During the service, he tried to reflect on the blessings in his life, especially Marissa. She was so thoughtful and generous, and even when she disagreed with something, she tried to meet him halfway. That generosity made him want to return the gesture to do something for her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Not everything she said was about compromise. Some things she simply believed in, like not rushing into marriage. But he'd asked what she wanted, and maybe this was part of the answer. On the drive back, his thoughts weighed on him. Was she sure this was what she wanted? He pulled off the road, knowing this deserved more than a passing comment. Marissa, are you sure you want to get married this June? He asked. Yes. It's less of a risk than you think. You trust me in so many things. I suppose I should trust you in this. His heart was pounding. He stepped out of the car, walked around to her side, and opened the door. Then he knelt down. Marissa Grant, will you marry me this June? Oh, Aaron, yes, she said. He kissed her as best he could from that position. The kneeling mattered more than the formality. He took her back to Zeta House, and she called him that night. Tell me what we decided this noon, she said. I think I may be dreaming. We decided to get married this June. Or, rather, I proposed and you accepted. We should pick out a ring. Do you want to help choose it? You'll be the one wearing it, after all. Yes, soon, she said. But just hearing it again means more to me right now. Still, now that he'd mentioned the ring, he wanted to act on it. Wednesday? After class. I'll be there. Abbott Hall. A few minutes after 3. I may be a little late, I have a 2 o'clock class too. That night, Aaron called his dad. Something happened? His dad asked. Aaron didn't usually call just to chat. Yes, we're engaged. Marissa accepted. When? His dad asked. This morning. No, I mean, when will you be married? This June. We haven't set a precise date. Is that important? Well, it will be. Could you be persuaded to put it off until after graduation? No. He'd accepted Marissa's program, and he wasn't going to change that acceptance for Dad. How about I promised you a 1-month honeymoon in the place of your joint choice if the wedding were after graduation? No. Shouldn't you consult your intended before you answer that question? We've discussed this, Dad, not that offer, but consequences. Do you really have savings to support a wife like Miss Grant? I'll not be able to call her Miss Grant anymore, will I? You told me that you didn't have enough savings to cover rent and food. Well, I was planning to ask you to cover rent again. It will have to be higher than this year. I haven't seen your place, but I know your tastes. I don't imagine Miss Grant will be willing to live in your style. Actually, Aaron, even if she were willing, I would advise against it. Sure, she'll make sacrifices for love, but those sacrifices erode the love. Dad didn't know how horrible a sacrifice Marissa was willing to make for love. Well, he said. Dad's comment worried him. Well, according to the support decree, I'm legally obliged to pay for your sister's college expenses. If I'm not legally obliged to pay for yours, I'm morally obliged. It would be nasty of me to cut you off when the reason I could is that you chose to live with me. Well, I may have regretted that choice in past years, but not half so much as Molly has been regretting hers. Dad changed the subject. He was never comfortable with criticism of Mom, however oblique. And then too, you don't plan to work in the hardware store this summer, do you? No, I don't think so. He didn't know much about weddings, but he knew they were complicated affairs. Do you think you could tell Mr. Schmidt that? Sure. Look, why don't you give me Miss Grant's number? I'll talk about housing direct with her. So he did. The rest of the conversation went over to how school was going. Then he had to make a harder call. Andrew, has something happened? If he seldom called Dad, he hadn't called Mom in years. No. Well, nothing like you're thinking. As a matter of fact, I'm calling to deliver good news. I'm getting married. Marissa Grant. The girls know her. Yeah, I've heard about her. Don't you have a year to go? Yeah, this is my junior year. We're going on in school. Both, God willing, her parents willing, actually going on in school next year. Is she pregnant? Are you sure it's yours? You're so trusting, Andrew. He was so trusting. This from the woman who'd married Elliot Brewster. Well, she's not. So stop worrying. As a matter of fact, he'd had evidence that she wasn't pregnant this morning. But Mom didn't need to know that. He realized how little of his current life she knew. Maybe the girls had told her about him, but if they'd talked about Marissa, it hadn't sunk in. Actually, she'd said that they had talked about Marissa. Am I invited? Of course. At least, you will be. Don't we have to have a date before we issue invitations? The girls will be invited, too. The girls will be invited, and Mom would be invited, too. He didn't want to say that, but she probably knew where his priorities lay. I don't know. You and the girls are so taken with her. I'll bet she's a gold digger. Mom, get real. Marissa is a wonderful girl. You say the girls are taken with her, and you haven't even met her. What sort of gold digger would be after me, anyway? I'm nearly broke. Actually, it was a miracle that Marissa had any interest in him at all. She could probably have any straight man she wanted. I think this is part of your father's plan for you. Well, marriage this June wasn't. That was for sure. What plan Mom thought that Dad had for him, he couldn't tell. That he get a good college education? Was that so sinister a plan? That he go into engineering? Actually, while Dad accepted that, he hadn't been all that enthusiastic. Well, it might be another 2 years before you call again. How is college going? Fine so far. I got all A's last quarter, and I've been at least on the dean's list since the second quarter of my freshman year. I had a few problems first quarter, but I straightened them out. I'm taking partial differential equations as a math course and 3 engineering courses. I'll be done with math after this quarter, and I'll take all engineering after that. Was there anything else? She sure didn't want a description of the engineering courses. Even Marissa's eyes glazed over when he talked about them. Well, college is more than classes, you know. I know. I started this discussion saying that I was engaged. I didn't propose in class. Actually, Marissa is an English and education major. We have never had a class together, and we only had a few subjects in common. The distribution courses and some others are taught at different times and places in the same quarter. Yeah, I did go to college, too, you know. Yeah, he did know. She, however, never talked about what she'd learned there. Dad, if he wasn't specific, had been a history major. He still read history and talked history with Aaron. Well, anyway, he said, I have to have a social life if I got engaged. It's just that the news of my social life is that I got engaged. And he wasn't going to discuss how he and Marissa spent their social time with Mom. Well, goodbye, Andrew. Thanks for letting me know. Call when you have more details. I will, Mom. And tell the girls, will you? Of course. Monday, he scouted out a jewelry store. It looked good to him, although he knew Marissa had more taste than he did. In fact, there was a campus full of people who had more taste than he and less than Marissa. The jeweler sold engagement rings on the installment plan. Wednesday, he drove to his afternoon classes and picked Marissa up at Abbott Hall after his last one. Talk to your parents? He asked after their hello kiss in the car. Mom. She was accepting, or more accurately resigned. She said that she couldn't claim that we were rushing into things. You talked to your dad? Yeah. He said he wanted to talk with you. I called Mom, too. We aren't going to get any support from her, of course. But will your dad pay your tuition? We didn't even mention that. I never thought that it was a question. Well, if the question isn't answered sometime, we might be in for a huge shock. I'll admit, though, that I took it as a victory when Mom didn't say that she wouldn't pay tuition. I didn't mention it, and neither did she. That's the most that I'd hoped for. He took her to the jewelry store he'd scouted out. She didn't seem to think he should have done better. She asked, so what's the budget? He hadn't thought of the ring in terms of a budget. It's for you, to show our love. There's no limit. Aaron. He'd stepped in it again. And how had he stepped in it with that statement? Pardon me, she said to the jeweler. Pardon us, sir. We've got some discussion before we choose. We'll be back. She walked towards the car with him trailing behind. She was so mad that she got in the car without even waiting for him to open the door. Look, she said. I'm going to be living on the budget. I'm going to be your wife. Of course, she was going to be his wife. That was what this was all about. I think I have a right to see the budget. I won't be happy saying, there isn't enough food in the house, but, boy, don't I have a lovely ring. Maybe the ring is your expenditure, but what's left afterwards is my living expenses for the next year. He hadn't thought about that. All he'd seen was that there was enough for the two of them to eat on in what was left over from this year. Actually, much more than half his savings was left over from this year, and much more than half would even be left when the quarter was over. But that was before they bought the ring. Well, he said, I don't have a budget right now. I had one for the 2 years. Then, I was living under it. I really didn't need a new budget if I was spending less than in the old one. Fine. Now, we need a budget. Where do you want to go to make one? He drove her back to the apartment. Apparently, his budget had been quite inadequate. He'd been under it with no problems, but Marissa wanted a concrete plan. He told her what he'd spent in the last few months. The checkbook helped there, but he kept records of all expenditures by categories such as food. She had him run that forwards till the end of the quarter. That and the gas for going home. She told him to subtract from what he had in the two banks. That was their money for the next year. She set $500 aside for emergencies, and then allotted the rest to different categories. The categories included food, clothing. He told her that he'd bought some underwear that year and didn't think he'd need anything else before graduation. She didn't accept that car expenses, gifts, travel, textbooks, incidentals. She'd covered so much, things he hadn't planned on the year before, that he couldn't figure what incidentals could be. She put it in, though. Some of that was a block, some car expenses and textbooks. Some of it was by the week. He took the weekly expenses, figured how many weeks between their marriage and graduation, multiplied it out, and added the block money. When that was done, they had $2,000 left for the ring. They figured that they had 14 months to make payments, and Marissa took $100 from the emergency funds to give $2,100 for the ring. That would be $150 a month. And that's not counting rent, Marissa said, to say nothing of tuition. Well, I'm sure Dad will pay those. He wanted to talk to you about rent. What worries me is the $150 a month. Well, you did the arithmetic. That's what we'll have. But that might not buy much of a ring. Aaron, darling, I could have a bigger engagement ring in a year. That's my choice. She didn't often call him darling. That was more often his word for her. And, after dinner and some study, she was a darling in his bed and in his arms. That Monday, after Marissa had gone over the budget again and he'd tried to, they returned to the jeweler's. We'd like to see engagement ring and wedding ring sets that will cost less than $150 a month, Marissa said. He was glad she was taking the lead. He hadn't even thought about a wedding ring. Ring for the groom as well as for the bride? The man asked. Marissa looked at him. Would asking for a ring bring the value of what she wore down? Would she take his not wearing a ring as not taking pride in being married to her? He damn well would be proud of being married to her. He shrugged. Let her decide. Yes, Marissa said. Let me make a suggestion. The sets that come together, with matching rings for bride and groom, are mostly out of your price range. Why don't you look at very simple wedding rings? Then you can choose an engagement ring which will go with them. And, while you're in this store and I haven't sized the rings, you can always decide differently. He looked at Marissa, who looked like she thought this was a good idea. She really. He trusted Marissa's taste much more than his own. Chose some simple gold rings. They were among the cheapest that this store stocked. The guy now showed Marissa what they could afford in engagement rings according to the budget. You can go way flashier with cubic zirconium. He'd never thought about that. He needed Marissa to be a guide in this aspect of the culture, as in so many other aspects. But she looked less comfortable in telling him what he should give her for an engagement ring than in telling him other things. Even I can't usually tell the difference on a finger. I look more closely through a loop to tell. On the other hand, we would know, Marissa said. A diamond is a diamond. She finally settled on one of the rings. Now, for the 3 rings, the down payment should be. The jeweler said. Down payment? He was aghast. You said I could pay by the month. Some problems he could solve. But this was Marissa's ring versus Marissa's budget. Well, yes, we take monthly payments. But a down payment is usual. We only have so much money, Marissa said. It's in savings, and we won't get any more until we graduate and get jobs. And that's 14 months away. Wait a minute. You have it in savings? Can you write a check for the 14 months today? Well, I could, and then he realized that he couldn't. I don't have my checkbook with me. Would they have to come back again? Go and get it. I'll stay here until you come back. If I get the next 14 months in advance, I don't need a down payment. He drove back to the apartment and got the checkbook. He wrote the check for $2,100. He'd lots of money back in Evanston, but this nearly depleted the checking account. Then the guy changed the size of his ring. They left the shop and drove to the campus. Once there, he walked around the car and opened her side. When she got out, he took the engagement ring out of his pocket. Marissa, will you marry me? Yes, Aaron, I will. She was smiling as he put the ring on her finger. They shared a kiss before they returned to the car. He let her out at Zeta House and returned to the apartment. It was lonely without Marissa, but the apartment now held not only some of her wardrobe, but the ring she would wear as his wife. At church, people learned of their engagement. That was one result of the ring. They congratulated both of them. He wasn't certain that Marissa should be congratulated for getting stuck with him. He, on the other hand, was facing a future which looked much brighter than anything in his past. He said that when he was driving her to Zeta House. Really, they should have only congratulated me. I'm marrying you, and you're marrying me. I'm obviously getting the better deal. Well, I think you're a great prize. All the girls, not only your fan club, were congratulating me. The Married Student Housing Office was open during office hours rather than retail hours. They went there on Wednesday. We're interested in next year, Marissa told the secretary. We're not married yet, but she flashed her engagement ring. Think you two are the first couple in that situation we've seen? In order to qualify, you have to show us your marriage license before moving in. The legislature pays for this, and they'd cut us off at the knees if we let one unmarried couple slip through. One person must be a student, and preference is given to couples who are both students. Now, do you want furnished or unfurnished? Furnished, Marissa said. She looked at floor plans. I think maybe this one, she said. What do you think, Aaron? It looked fine to him. Well, you know my bottom line. That would do great if you like it. They ate another delicious meal that Marissa cooked at the apartment. They studied across from each other. Then they were in bed together. Every night, he said. Every night, she echoed. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.